All right, we're live.
All right. Thanks, Anthony. Appreciate it. Hey, good evening. It is 5 o'clock West Coast time, and excited for all of you to join us for the perhaps the much anticipated early decision webinar. But before we continue on, would love to see where everybody is calling in from. So if you can go to the chat and go ahead and post the grade of your student, or if you're a student, your grade, of course, and then also where you are calling in from. So city or state or some locator would be great. So please go ahead and go to the chat. Appreciate it. And my sense is that we should be getting mostly seniors, but I love ninth grade Belmont, California. And so um and always also love reconnecting with my friends from Fresno. So good to see everybody. Go ahead and keep posting. And just a reminder, go ahead and if you have questions along the way, go ahead and post them in the Q&A. Anthony, my faithful colleague for many a year, will come back and join in, and we'll rehash all the questions that are being posted, and answer as many questions as we can. I think normally I have like a good 45 to 50 minutes of content, but we should be finishing up a little bit earlier and provide as much space and much time at the end to answer specific scenarios regarding applying early to schools. And if you have like even a specific scenario with your child applying through, then we can certainly address some of those scenarios. But otherwise, excited for you to be here. And it looks like we're very much West Coast, but appreciate Michigan calling in as well. But yeah, go ahead and keep listing where you're from. Appreciate it, and go ahead and post questions at any time. So why don't we get started? Today's topic, should I apply early decision? Let me do a quick intro of myself, if I may. My name is Elton Lin, CEO and founder of Illumina Education. I've been doing private college advising for almost 16 years, remarkably. Our team at Illumina Education, we work with over 400 students a year, submit over 2,000 apps a year, read up to 4,000 essay drafts a year. We have 15 counselors on our team. A lot of our students hail from this Silicon Valley Bay area. Certainly, we worked with a lot of students from around the United States and the world as well. We've had students submitted to every top 50, including every Ivy League multiple times over. Our internal admit rate to top 15 schools is up to 7x the national average. And I've been very fortunate to have been profiled by a few national media outlets over the course of my time doing this work. So why don't we jump in and a free senior timeline calendar. So especially for those of you who are rising seniors, our team put together a free senior timeline calendar. You can go ahead and download it there. It's actually version point 0. So we would love for you to actually download it, take a look, give us some feedback on how we can make it better. But our team, including Anthony and Anna, have put in a lot of time and are trying to make it as helpful as helpful of a way for you to track the important deadlines that are coming up for your senior year. So today's agenda, what is early decision, and what are some of the other early programs that schools use to help enroll students in the forthcoming class? What are important trends to consider? What should students do? So let's first certainly answer that question as well. And then what are some questions at the end? And we'll try to create as much time as we can. So just to define early decision means that if you apply to a school early decision, it means that you promise to attend a college if they accept you. And and some basic rules when applying early decision, as the definition sort of implies, early decision is binding. And again, if you apply in, they admit you, you have to go. You can only have one active ED application at a given time, just to, perhaps that's obvious, but just to make it clear, you can't apply to 3 early decision schools at the same time. The only viable reason to back out of an early decision agreement is documented financial hardship. So if you were to get into a school, I mean, I had a student, had a family get into a student get into Carnegie Mellon on early decision. Unfortunately, the father lost their employment that fall and was able to come back to the school to ask for a release from that early decision agreement. So, only reason is documented financial hardship. ED follows a tighter timeline than the standard application cycle. So you apply November 1st, you hear your results mid-December. There is a second early decision. So there's an ED2 where you can apply January 1st, and then you hear the results sometime in mid-February. And we've heard more and more of these stories as of late, but if you want to break the ED agreement, and not because of financial hardship, it can damage your high school's relationship with that college and hurt future applicants from that high school. So there's every motivation to try from the school side, from the university side, to encourage, keep you to holding on to your ED commitment if you're admitted. And then the last rule is that not every school has ED1 or ED2 or EA. Every school chooses their own early program. So whether it is only ED1 or whether it's only EA or whether it's only REA, I'll define some of those terms. But every school has a slightly different early program. So just to kind of give you maybe a visual on the timeline, again, if you apply November, early decision, early action, and you hear your results sometime in mid-December, again, January, you get another shot at it with early decision 2 and the regular admission deadlines. Oftentimes you will hear the ED2 results sometime in mid-February, and for your regular, if you're applying regular decision or regular admission in January, then you'll hear those results sometime in March and April, and then you must decide where you want to go on May 1st. Some benefits, pros and cons to early decision. Certainly, finding out results early is great. It reduces some stress. So I always, I always feel like for a lot of students who get in on an early decision program early, you hear the result in December, man, you go into winter break feeling good. Everyone's relaxed. Everyone's having a good time. You can just eat as much as you can, and everyone is stressing on that January 1st deadline. You're having a good time. So reduces stress. Sometimes you get access to housing early, which is good. So you get preferential options on where you want to live on campus. And then the biggest benefit that most people think about is that it does improve your chances. Now, there's a caveat to that, of course. But generally speaking, you're going to get an improved chance of being admitted to that particular school that you're applying early decision. Detriments, if you need senior year first semester grades to improve your overall academic profile, you won't be able to do that because you're applying November 1st, first semester senior year. They won't see your first semester senior grades. So your grades or whatever academic profile that you want to be ready for needs to be done by the end of your junior year, potentially maybe at the end of the summer after your junior year, but that's really the cutoff timeline. So you won't have your senior year grades. You won't be able to compare financial aid offers. So a lot of families come in, and you want to see. You want to perhaps see what the financial aid offer is from multiple schools, and maybe weigh the cost benefit of that. You won't be able to. You certainly have less time to finish your app, and then certainly the last detriment is that you are locked into that ED choice if you're admitted. And why do colleges like early decision? I mean, I think bottom line is that colleges don't like the guesswork. So you have to think about it from their perspective as well, is that they're putting together a freshman class. They're trying to, and there's more and more students who are applying to who are submitting more and more applications. And it's becoming less and less clear to colleges who's actually coming. So if you submit an application on early decision and they know if they admit you, you're going to come, it makes their job so much easier. So colleges don't like the guesswork. Colleges want to accept students who want to attend, obviously. So if you apply early decision, you're certainly communicating to the school that that's your first choice. ED for them is the ultimate form of demonstrated interest. Demonstrated interest is a term to where colleges are trying to ascertain how interested a student is in their particular school. So if you apply ED, that's the ultimate form of demonstrating your interest to them. And then colleges, and then also on early decision or the early round, colleges often try to meet their institutional priorities on that early round. So if a school needs to admit more students from rural areas, lower income, first gen students, whatever it may be, they often will look into the early round to try to meet some of those institutional priorities. I know this is a little bit of an esoteric, I mean, maybe not. Let me just explain. But these, if you're familiar with the term waitlist, just to catch us all up, if you apply, when you apply to college, oftentimes you are, if you're not admitted, there's a lot of students who are being put on wait lists to be admitted to particular schools. So we do have some waitlist stats from last cycle. And if you were to take a quick look at this, what it is that these are the year over year shifts in the waitlist admit rate. So if you just look at the top in 20 for class of 2027, not year 2027, obviously we haven't hit that yet, but for class of 2027, their admit rate off the waitlist was 9%. 2028 for Purdue, it was 0%. But in 2029 is 97%. I mean, that's an insane level of volatility. Skip down a couple rows, Johns Hopkins, 4%. I mean, Johns Hopkins, top 10 university, supremely desirable place for a lot of students. Definitely the desire of a lot of people's hearts. 4% 2027 makes sense off the wait list. 2% in 2028. 43% for, I'm sorry, 43% for class of 2029. So even for a school like Johns Hopkins, Purdue, you can insert in here. I would also consider like Scripps College also a very like selective university. Even for these schools, it's difficult to figure out who is coming. So often when you don't get the numbers right, you have to go to your wait list to try to make sure your class is filled and filled in the right way. So the point being is that it's harder to predict where students are going. Um, Let's see. Just to kind of give you a quick glimpse, certainly there is a higher admit rate for specific schools. If you're applying to Northeastern at the regular deadline, it's 4%. That has changed in 2025. So these are but just to give you a little bit of a comprehensive graphic. But regular admit rate was 4%. Early decision admit rate was 43%. Obviously, for Northeastern, it's a 11x difference on applying early decision over regular. If you look at if you just kind of skim the list, Northwestern 23%, regular rate 6%. So what you're seeing is that if you apply early decision, they are admitting they are, in this sense, more likely to admit from that pool over the regular admit pool. Now, if you just kind of play with the numbers in a sense, it's obviously a smaller pool. Obviously, as I mentioned before, colleges are looking to meet certain institutional priorities on that early round, but they're looking to lock in more of the freshman class in that early round than they have in previous years. So in this graphic, this is the number of applicants submitted through early decision, obviously, divided by number of students in the freshman class. So what you're seeing here is that over the course of time, colleges are using the early round to fill a higher percentage of their class on the early round. So if you look at the most extreme example here, which is Boston University in 2015, they only filled 20% of their freshman class on the early decision round. But in 2024, they filled 61% of their class on the early round. So that makes the shift in again, the admit rate between the early decision round as compared to the regular decision round much more extreme. And what it does again is that for the benefit of the school, they're able to secure a higher percentage of the freshman class. They know their numbers much earlier in the academic year, and they're not having to rely so much on the regular decision round, right? So again, it's less and less clear who's going where. Colleges want to use early decision to make it clear for them. And really this is becoming the trend that more and more universities are opting to include an early decision option. So for example, University of Michigan for as long as I've been doing this hasn't had an early decision option until last year. And so this is University of Michigan saying themselves they've been losing out on some of the best students to other schools that offer early decision. And so they recognize that it's really a competitive landscape, even for a school like University of Michigan. And so by inserting early decision, it allows them to also compete in that marketplace for the best students around the United States, around the world. So maybe as some of the recent changes in early decision, University of Chicago has inserted what they call an SSEN, which is sort of an early decision-ish type program for students who went to the University of Chicago summer program. So, which is, I think, very different, very interesting, very innovative in that sense. Rice has introduced an early decision too. Obviously, University of Michigan, as we mentioned. So there is this trend towards including some form of early decision program for many of the top universities. And again, going back to what I think most families and students are thinking about is that if colleges are now valuing more the early decision applicant, that obviously means that from the student's end, you hold that early decision option. That's sort of like a ticket or an option that you hold to try to strategically think about where you want to go and to improve your chances along the way. Um, who should apply early decision? Let me give you some things to think about for 11th and 12th grade students who, if you have a first choice college, like there's one school that, you know what, if I get in here, I will be supremely happy. I'm excited. Like that's where I want to be at. That's great. So if you have that first choice college, that's fantastic. You're done with standardized testing. So sometimes for some students, they need that fall test sitting, whether it's like an October or November SAT, and they want to get your test score higher. If you're done with standardized testing, that's great. And in addition to, or you're in financial position to use the ED option. Remember, I said before that you can't compare financial aid offers from multiple schools. If you're in financial position to really commit to a school without reviewing all the other financial aid offers, and that's great. And then I would say this is my suggestion is that you ought to be at or above the 75th percentile for admits to that particular school. Now, we can kind of get into this. I mean, I think I got into this in previous webinars, but oftentimes someone might say like should the 50th percentile be enough? Like if you're in the median in a particular spectrum of data for a particular school, then should that not be good enough? The reality is that oftentimes the sort of like maybe the there's a schools may admit students from their institutional priorities, maybe from more rural communities or more first gen or wherever it might be. Maybe, or it could be athletes as well. So a lot of those students may be in that sort of like a bottom 50th percentile of the applicant pool. And so if you're not from a particular group that is a high priority for the admissions office, and you're a normal student coming from a large metropolis in the United States, San Francisco Bay Area, Washington D.C., New York, Boston, wherever it might be, if you're just sort of a normal student, oftentimes you need to look at that 50th to 100 percentile to really get a sense of what the academic profile looks like for just regular students being admitted. So if you're looking at that 50th to 100 percentile, you ought to be dead center of that 50th to 100 percentile. That's my suggestion. Certainly, I think if you end up, say, below the 50th percentile, my sense is that if you use early decision, you're likely going to be like an easy rejection, or you're just going to get pushed and deferred out and potentially just put on wait lists and kind of deferred out forever, right? So my sense is that if you want to maximize that ED option, then really think about trying to locate yourself in this bracket. And how do I know if I'm at or above the 73rd percentile? The best place is your high school's college counseling platform. So a lot of schools use platforms like Naviance, Score, Maya Learning, BridgeU, whatever it might be. There you will find the average entry GPA for students from your particular high school to almost every university in the United States. So if you look there, that's where you'll have a better estimate of where you sit in that spectrum of students who are being admitted. So this is, I'll give you an example. This is a Maya Learning screenshot for Boston University, and you'll get this scattergram of specifically students from your high school, in this case, applying to Boston University, and you'll see what, if you were to kind of move your cursor over these dots, you'll see exactly the academic, like the GPA and SAT, ACT test of the students who were admitted and rejected. So you can at least get that and have a better understanding of where you sit. I think one thing that's harder to compare, really, is it's harder. I mean, the college counseling platforms don't have like a student's activity list, so it's really harder to really compare your activity resume between somebody who's getting into, an Ivy League school or and someone who's not. Like you don't really see that, but at least you see the GPA and test score, and that is helpful. So just as a reminder, a relook at the deadlines, and obviously November. But this whole thing, as I sort of alluded to, is that like if you orchestrate it correctly, and if ED is such a powerful option, you can use ED twice, right? So if you apply ED1 in November, hear the result in mid-December. Let's have, let's unfortunately you hear that you don't get in. That's too bad, but you get another shot at using ED2 at the January 1st deadline. And so there is a way for you to use early decision twice. So I'm a student of ours, applied to Duke on ED1. This was 2 years ago. Heard back on December 15th. Unfortunately, was not admitted. But like we had a couple days to kind of regroup, grieve the loss, and then say, okay, do we want to use ED2? And the student then said, I want to use the ED2 on University of Chicago, submitted the application on January 1st, and then what was admitted in February to University of Chicago. So students happy, you got to use the ED option twice and to really maximize your options in that way. So here are a few examples of schools that have an ED1 and ED2 program. Oftentimes you may want to think about applying to a school ED1 and then having a second ED option on the ED2. So if you notice, Johns Hopkins is on both ED1. Actually, all the ED2 schools have an ED1. So if the school that you're applying to has an ED2, you might want to save it for the second round. But that's just maybe thinking strategically how you want to play your ED options. And I'll kind of come back to that in a moment. But just to kind of give you some examples of which schools have one or both of the early decision options. All right. Let me do a couple of other definitions for us. What is early action? Early action is non-binding, and you are not required to attend should they accept you. But as mentioned, if you apply early action, you're applying early, and you also hear the result earlier than normal. So benefits, detriments, you find out results early, as mentioned, obviously reduce stress, as I said again. The benefits that you can compare financial aid. So if you apply early action to a school, you get the result. You're not binded in. You don't have to go to that school. So you can wait on the regular round, get all the results in, see all the financial aid offers, and then really compare your options, see what's really the best option for you. Obviously, you're not locked into an ED choice of admitted is the benefit. On the detriments, again, if you apply early, you can improve your grades. You have less time to finish your app. But the ED round has not really proven to substantially improve your admission. Now we can kind of get into there are some specific examples to where we interviewed the Purdue admissions rep for Northern California a couple of years back. She did mention that Purdue does try to fill their engineering class on the early rounds. So just those of you who are interested in applying to Purdue and your engineering majors, because engineering school at Purdue is such a high demand major, make sure you apply at the early round specifically for Purdue. But otherwise, for the overwhelming majority of schools, the EA round doesn't really improve your chances substantially. And that's where you don't get the benefit of the whole binding agreement. So, all right. What is restricted early action? So restricted early action means you can only apply early to that one school. So there's going to be a small handful of schools, and most notably Harvard, Stanford, Yale, Princeton, have what they call restricted early action. They're not binding you into that agreement because they are certainly, you can argue that they're the most popular schools on the market. They don't need to bind you in because, like, if they admit you, most students would want to go. But they're not binding you in, but they require that you only apply to them. Now, there is a minor loophole where schools, especially like Stanford, says it very, very, very outwardly that they will allow you to apply early to public early action programs like University of Michigan, University of Virginia. But otherwise, schools, the Harvard, Stanford, Yale, Princeton, have a REA. They only want you to apply early to them. So some benefits: find out results early again, reduce stress, can compare financial aid. Again, detriments: does not substantially improve your admissions. So this is where it's like you have to kind of decide whether is Harvard, Stanford, Yale, Princeton, is that really your top choice? And you may want to construct it to where you're applying early. This is where I've seen a lot of students, they apply early to one of those big schools and they consider ED2 on the second option, right? So, and then maybe some examples: schools with early action. This is not comprehensive on the EA. There's more schools on this, but here's some examples: Michigan, USC, Georgetown, UNC Chapel Hill, and schools with REA. This is more comprehensive, which is Harvard, Stanford, Princeton, Yale, Caltech, and Notre Dame. So just to give you a few examples. All right. Why I would not apply ED. And so maybe just to kind of give you some things to think about, it's not right for me if I need to compare financial aid packages. So again, if you are in, I mean, if it's really helpful to the family to really look at all the offers. And again, I've covered this in other webinars where I've encouraged families to actually apply to more safety schools because these safety schools are in better position to be able to give you some kind of merit package to try to entice you to come. And so if it's a safety school, likely your academic profile is in the top third of the applicant pool. And if for that school, you become a more desirable student for that particular school. So, and then oftentimes they will then use scholarship funding to try to attract you to come. So if that's helpful to you, and that's helpful to 98% of families, then you need to see it, then I would opt out of the ED. Um, Again, you need to see senior year grades account. You need your senior year grades account in order to improve your academic profile. It's understandable. Thirdly, you're not 100% sure of your dream school. I mean, you really don't know. And so I would not force the issue on early decision if unless you have a school that's really at the top of your list. And then oftentimes, especially because we're based in California, we have a lot of students who where their top choice is UC Berkeley or UCLA. And if you apply, and UCs don't use early decision. So if you use early decision on, like, say, Northeastern, and you get in, you don't get to hear what the UC results are going to be. So if a school, your top choice school doesn't have ED, then I would really opt out of using ED. So I really think it's important to, I think there's a lot of strategic talk. There's a lot of students and families who really want to maximize the use of the ED. But again, come back and think about what's the best right fit school for you first, before you try to over strategize on the ED. Um, I'm making great time and I might be talking super fast, but this is so that we can have tons of time for questions. So go ahead, as I kind of finish this last part, feel free to post some questions, and Anthony will come back and we'll tackle those. So to give you a student example, here's a student of ours. Her name is June, Los Altos High School, to maybe give you a quick gauge of her profile. 3.85 to 4.35, ACT 33. You can get a sense of where her activity resume looks like. I think a very, though pretty outstanding, but to be frank with you, I think fairly common for a very high performing student, especially a student who is interested in bio, pre-med, bioengineering. Has done some research, science Olympiad team, speech and debate, some leadership. I think perhaps most notable is that she did win an award at her regional science fair. So I mean, some good things and fairly strong. And so I think definitely to her credit. This is the school list that we worked with her on to create. Her dream school is Stanford. Her reach category of schools: Johns Hopkins, Emory, Michigan, UC Berkeley, and then I do want to acknowledge that I think she built a good target and safety list. So if you look at a span of these schools, these are all schools that have substantial research money in areas that she was interested in, and then maybe Santa Clara, Oxy, Pepperdine were maybe her backups, and perhaps wanting to stay in California. But all other universities, robust research opportunities where she can really explore what she wants to do. So what does she do? What do we do? And just to kind of give you a glimpse real quickly, Stanford is REA, but the other highlighted schools have an early decision program. And specifically JHU, and a few other schools have an ED too. Michigan, I didn't notice, only has an ED1. Johns Hopkins, Emory both have an ED2. So you're kind of thinking through this like strategic positioning. So should I, maybe an option would be to apply to Johns Hopkins ED1, or maybe apply to Michigan ED1, Johns Hopkins ED2. But is that what she wanted? Maybe she applied to Johns Hopkins ED1, maybe Emory ED2. Maybe you submit Stanford on REA on the early deadline, and then you save Johns Hopkins and Emory for ED2. We talked through everything. What she opted to do was that she opted to apply REA to Stanford, and Stanford unfortunately rejected her, as they do to many a student. But she did apply ED2 to Johns Hopkins, as was thankfully admitted to Johns Hopkins. And so this is where how an example of how you might think about how to kind of situate your early options and see where they might fit. So, but the beginning point was that every school on this list was already a good fit for her. So she wasn't trying to strong arm an ED program. She wasn't trying to, oh, let's just apply to some other random school that has an early decision program. You first think about what's a good fit school for you first, and then you start looking at your ED options. So maybe some words of wisdom. Let me suggestions to all families as they think about their options. Run the net price calculator before applying. So every school has a net price calculator. You can just search whatever school, Cornell net price calculator. It's going to come up, and you can get a sense of um, what type of scholarship or financial aid you might get, and you'll have a clear understanding of what you're going to pay if you're admitted. So run the net price calculator before applying. Visit the school or talk to a student. I mean, definitely before applying ED, you should have a clear understanding of whether that school is really a good fit for you. As I mentioned before, don't optimize for ED first. I mean, I almost feel like, and I'm one of these kinds of people who like using coupons and credits and those kind of things. And I like optimizing for maximum savings. I'm a child of an immigrant, so I can't, I'm kind of built that way. But if I were to encourage you, don't optimize for ED first. Figure out first what's the right fit school. Figure out where you want to be. Figure out um, what type of environment will be best for you to thrive. Figure out that part first before you come back to ED. So, which then kind of leads me to separate strategy from emotions. So don't don't begin with strategy. Begin with what's right for you, and then come back to strategy. And then I would also say assume you'll be rejected, and make sure you have a backup plan, because Like on the earlier graphic, Northwestern was a 4% admit rate. On the early round, it was 23%. You might think to yourself, oh, it's a 6x, 5 or 6x chance of getting in. But don't forget, there's a more than 75% chance you'll still be rejected. So don't don't get overhyped up. Get the strategy in, have a backup plan. Don't feel like, oh my, ED, we're absolutely going to get in. Perhaps if you applied early decision to maybe a safety school, that might be the case. But if you're applying in, like again, like assume you'll be rejected, have a backup plan, make sure you think about your different options. So maybe last thing, again, find the right fit school for you first before you get into this early decision strategizing, optimizing. And as I've been saying, maybe my last and final word before Anthony comes on. Again, this again, we work with a lot of students. It's stressful. And again, all of our students, they know what's at stake. They're under a lot of stress. Honestly, they're doing the best that they can. And so let me encourage you, parents, those of you who are parents on the call, remind your kids often that you love them, no matter how the results turn out. They do need to hear it from you. And in the midst of this whole process, it's good for them to know that their parents are loving them all the way through. All right, questions. So let me invite Anthony back on, and let me invite back Anthony back on. And if there are no questions, you know what? We're going to all adjourn early,
I was gonna say it's been a
have a nice dinner.
slow day.
That's all right. The East Coast people get to
Which
get to get to prepare for bed. The West Coast people so all right, we do have a question.
Yeah, question about with more difficult funding environments. I think this is alluding to seeing the news of a lot of universities or colleges closing down. The question is, do you anticipate the institutions use ED more to try to shore up revenue or try to shore up interest?
Yeah, so there's certainly media coverage and a lot of prognosticators predicting that recently somebody said 400 colleges are going to close in the forthcoming few years. I don't suspect that those schools will institute an early decision program. Now, just to define, maybe your small liberal arts college that's not maybe ranked in the top 50. I think it's or ranked maybe in the top 75. I think it's unlikely because the reality is that they actually just need more students. Um, and and uh, and I have not seen a lot of those schools where it has. I have not seen those programs instituted at a lot of those schools, because I don't think it's become like a beneficial like marketing or enrollment strategy for them. So I don't suspect that's going to happen for those schools. For top 50 schools to where you're getting 40, 50, maybe even 100,000 applications, and you have way less clarity on which student from that pool is actually coming, those schools, there's certainly a trend from among those schools that there's going to be more ED programs. So as I mentioned earlier, Michigan just instituted ED. University of Chicago has their own kind of version of another ED program that they've innovated out. So that is coming. That's almost for sure. So all right. Any other questions? Let me also throw this on as well. Um, Seriously, if there's it's okay, and if there's no other questions, um Anthony gets some time off, um gets to go have dinner early. I think my only thing is that I think, especially for those of you who are rising, maybe students who are rising senior students, or your parents are rising seniors, um I would focus in on the college, just college lists first, really assess who which schools are really the best fit, and then come back at the, at the maybe at the end of the summer when your college list is more clear, and then really start thinking about strategy. And so even for us, as we're counseling students, we're not trying to discuss early decision too early because we don't want to cloud the conversation before finding the right fit school. So but it unfortunately is moving in this direction. Now, I do want to just make a comment that I do feel like there has been talk about lawsuits coming from families and other organizations against schools that have early decision because the reality is that it does favor families who are financially ready to commit to early decision. And so I think it's a fair commentary on the system, and I do feel like the system is problematic in certain respects, and I'm not predicting that there will be a massive shift away from early decision unless there's something drastic from those lawsuits. Those haven't been filed, but there is talk about those coming in coming years, and but just something to think about. So, all right. Any question of any kind? It could be early decision or it could be not. So happy to talk about anything, especially for those of you who are raising senior families and you want to broach any topic whatsoever. All right, Anthony. Anthony, we
Everyone else is already
have
eating dinner,
answered
Elton. No
everyone's.
one wants to.
No worries, no worries. It is the end of May. Everyone deserves to enter into summer with as much joy and delight as possible. So, our hope is that the content today has been helpful, and we have a lot of forthcoming content coming, and including financial aid, financial college financial planner, a lot, especially for those of you who are rising seniors. We have a college essay webinars coming in June and August, and then our president, who is a former UC admissions counselor, she's going to come in and give you the lowdown on the UC. So that is also coming in the forthcoming months. So keep a lookout. Appreciate all of you for coming on. And any last words, Anthony?
No, but I guess I'm ready to get dinner.
Ready to get dinner. East Coasters, good night. West Coasters, have a good meal, and we'll see you on the next show. All right, take
Thanks,
care, everybody.
everyone.
All
Yep.
right,
Bye.
bye.